So for the rest of this story to make sense, you gotta take in the first part. This team's tight end depth chart was as follows. Number 1, Pat Freiermuth. Number 2, Darnell Washington. Number 3, Donald Parham. Number 4, Connor Hayward. And then, this week at OTAs, Parham went down with an Achilles injury, lost for the season. Doesn't seem like that would be that much of a roster disruptor, though, does it? Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into hockey and or baseball. I also happen to offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates. I hope you'll check those out as well. The 6th and final day of OTAs will unfold this morning. I'll be there to cover it for DK Pittsburgh Sports, and I fully expect to see the healthy tight ends that I just mentioned still out there. However, ever since Parham was hurt, an initial report before that injury that had suggested that the Steelers and the Dolphins were discussing a trade that had sent no less than Jonnu Smith to Pittsburgh ended up getting blown up. Like really blown up. Like we were told at DK Pittsburgh Sports, in no uncertain terms by somebody who would very, very much know. Nothing to it. Agent was planning something because Smith and the Dolphins were having some trouble reaching a contract extension. Okay, then Parham goes down. Then, just a few hours later, what do you know? The Steelers and Dolphins stuff is bang, like that, resurrected. And guess what? This time, it's legit. This time, it's confirmed all around that the Steelers and Dolphins are, in fact, having at least some sort of conversation regarding a trade for Smith. So, sounds awesome, right? I mean, what could be better? Smith is a pretty serious football player. In the 2024 season alone, he set Miami franchise records for catches with 88, for receiving yards with 884 by a tight end, and he was the Dolphins' only selection to the Pro Bowl. He also was the Dolphins' overall leading receiver at any position. And if you say, okay, well, who cares? The Dolphins weren't any good. He also happened to be the 4th leading receiver among all NFL tight ends behind Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, George Kittle. Add to that Arthur Smith was Jonnu Smith's tight ends coach and then eventually his offensive coordinator in Nashville, and that Arthur Smith would trade for Jonnu Smith whenever Arthur became the head coach in Atlanta. Then throw in that Jonnu Smith is 29 years old, so he's probably still got some good football in him. The question is, what do you do with him? In the most prevalent scheme that Arthur Smith used last season, I'm going to keep using both of their first names since we're going back and forth here, Arthur and Jonnu, there would be 2 tight ends lining up. Freiermuth on the right, Washington on the left. There would occasionally be a third. That would be Michael Pruitt. And Pruitt would even every once in a blue moon get a pass thrown his way because Arthur Smith believes in involving 3 tight ends in the passing game. Now, Pruitt was cut after 1 year, a clear sign that the Steelers weren't interested in seeing a sequel. And when Parham arrived, he did so after not playing at all last season. He was on a practice squad with the Chargers, if memory serves. So you don't get the impression from either that move or the initial employment of Pruitt that they took that slot, the TE3 slot, seriously enough to all of a sudden say, hey, wow, Jonnu Smith is available. Let's go get him. Well, okay, now let's make the safest assumption of all time that this wouldn't necessarily be received all that well in the tight ends room. However, the tight end targets get distributed, there'd be less of them for Freiermuth. There might be less of a chance for Washington to even get on the field. And the younger Hayward, his job's in jeopardy regardless. I could see, I don't want to say I could easily see, but I could see several scenarios that would have Hayward not make it onto the 53 by the time the team leaves for East Rutherford. Now, also, and I say this with immense admiration and respect for those who are currently in that room, if you have the opportunity to upgrade at any position in the National Football League, meaning a real, feasible opportunity, there's nothing to discuss. There's nothing to debate other than fit. Now, we're not going to have to wonder how Jonnu Smith and Arthur Smith would mesh with each other. They've got years of that together. What we might have to worry about is how you would align the multiple tight ends, or would you actually bring in someone like a Jonnu Smith and tell him, we just want you to do what Parham was going to do? I mean, that's kind of silly. If you look at their stats, just between Jonnu Smith and Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, again, 88 catches, 884 yards, 8 touchdowns. Freiermuth, 65 catches, 653 yards, 7 touchdowns. Now, all kinds of asterisks you can attach to that. You know, Freiermuth had to deal with a quarterback who didn't want to throw over the middle for the second half of the season. Freiermuth also caught 65 of 78 targets, which is a really nice rate. So is there more in Freiermuth? Sure. But I'll tell you what, I've spent enough time with Arthur Smith to know that anytime I bring up any scenario in which you throw in a certain player that you wouldn't think would fit with what he wants to do, he'll just give you this real casual, no problem. You can absolutely do that. No, yeah, why wouldn't you be able to do that? I have a feeling he'd want to figure this one out. And one other thing before we go to the break. You know all that angst that everyone has, myself included, about WR2? Well, when we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Brandon Jones, who says, DK, is there any reality in which the veterans on this team come together and tell Mike Tomlin that they'd rather roll with Mason Rudolph, if they believe in him, than picking up Aaron Rodgers for just 1 year? You know, Brandon, I have a reflex reaction to that question to just totally shut it down and maybe even not at you, but laugh at the notion, laugh at the concept, because I'm trying to picture who would have the stones to do that, since the head coach would have a reaction that'd probably be unlike anything they'd ever seen from him before. That, as has been made clear over the years by both players and the coach himself, is a red line and a half. He does not want to hear what the players want or don't want. And listen, all anybody needs to do, Brandon, is go back to the whole Kenny Pickett versus Mason Rudolph thing, or before that, the Kenny versus Mitch Trubisky thing, when it was crystal clear who was making those calls, and it was equally clear which way the players wanted to go in each instance, especially when it came down to Kenny versus Mason. So no, my answer is no on that front, but I'm going to take it further, because you have to remember that when you're talking about the veterans of this team, I'm using your phrase here, you're talking about guys on defense. If you go across that offense, you're not going to have anywhere near enough cachet to be able to even bring something like that up with anybody. In fact, as I work my way from left to right across the line of scrimmage here, the only member of that entire offense who has that would be DK Metcalf, except that Metcalf's brand new here. So no, there isn't anybody who's going to pull this off internally unless it's the one individual who's over Tomlin's head. And if I'm looking at that calendar again, and I'm seeing that today is June 5, and today is the last, to repeat this, day of OTAs, that means that next Tuesday is the start of mandatory minicamp. And after those 3 days, there's nothing happening in football for 5 full weeks. So if Rodgers isn't in for minicamp, maybe that's when the one voice that does count to Tomlin finally pipes up, presuming all of this is being perceived correctly, that this is just a Tomlin thing. Appreciate the question, Brandon. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. Again, I'll be over there covering the team this morning, and then this afternoon at 4 p.m., we will have a live double shot of Steelers. That's our every weekday video. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel and, of course, on our own platforms, the DK Pittsburgh Sports app and website. Hope to see you then.